Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Normal 40 the podcast. My name is Lon Stroshine. I am the founder of the Normal 40. Thank you so much for taking some time to tune into this podcast today. I'm really excited to share today's episode with you because today's episode's a little bit different than most of the episodes I've cut to this point. And it's different not because it is anything different that's happening behind the scenes. It's different because I'm sharing with you what happens behind the scenes. If you've been part of this podcast for any amount of time, you've heard my own advertisement for my own community that I put on this podcast. It's called The Insider. And The Insider is a community I started about 3 years ago and got a little bit more serious about it about 2 years ago. And in the last year, I got quite a bit more serious about it. And serious, I don't mean serious from the standpoint of I care about it more. Serious from the standpoint of, oh, this is what this is. When I very first started, I didn't know who would show up. I didn't know what a community should do. I didn't know how it should operate and act. I just knew that it should have one. That at this point in the journey, it gets lonely. It gets scary. We have nobody to tell about how we feel. And we have shame and guilt for having so much and feeling so little. So rather than doing something about it, we just wait because that's the easiest thing to do. We survived yesterday. We will most likely survive today. So why rock the boat? Even though every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we wake up with a pit in our gut, not really wanting to go through the motions of what we've got to do, but also equally uncertain about what we would do if it wasn't more of this. I felt like that person needed a community. They needed a home. They needed a place where they could just air what they're feeling. A place where they could be surrounded by people who are just like them. And if I could show up to LinkedIn again and again and again and create a newsletter and then create a Substack and create a podcast that resonated with people, a podcast that all they had to do was put their earbuds in and listen, and it connected them and it gave them a place, even if only in their own head, to feel normal. If I could do that first and then invite them to do the next thing, which is invite them into a conversation with me. And for 3.5 years, I've been doing that for free. Just book a ramble or join a community or join Vintage or come to one of my live events, but a place to be human outside of your own head with somebody who's done it before or with a community of people who do it with you. I felt like I have to do that. I don't know how to build it. I don't know who will show up, but I had to start. And that's what I started about 3 years ago. 2 years ago, I said, okay, well, I can charge for this. And I should charge for it. Because by the way, it's not that at $47 a month, I'm going to get rich off of that. It's that if you're not willing to at least spend $47 a month to have access to me and access to hundreds of people who are where you are and access to the tools and access to the fans to bet on you, if you're not willing to invest $47 in you, you're probably just not ready. You probably should just keep listening to this podcast. But when the moment comes where you're like, you know what, I need to check this out. I need to see what I get for $47. I need to see who's in this community. I need to see what happens when I permit myself to connecting with people who might be part of my future. Magic happens. Change happens. Community happens. And that's what I started discovering as I was building this community. Now, about a year ago, out of a problem, something new happened. About a year ago, I wasn't going to be able to make an insider call. I was going to be gone. And what I had done up to that point and before was I just canceled it. I'm like, hey, sorry, I'm not going to make it. I'll see you next week. Well, this time I thought maybe, just maybe I can have a member of the community lead out. Just lead it. Just tell their story. It's so important for what we're all doing here. It's so important to just be able to tell our story that sometimes we don't do it. We don't bother to do it. And when I asked this individual to tell their story, they always start at this place of nobody really wants to hear my story. And I told this person at the time, I'm like, well, just show up and lead the call. Just lead the call and see who shows up and just talk about your journey and what brings you here and what you get from this community and what you have to offer to this community, and give them 1 or 2 lessons. That's it. 1 or 2 lessons that were helpful to you, words of advice from somebody, take something out of my book and talk about that, whatever. I don't care, but lead it. And they said, yeah, I'll do that. And they were excited to do it. And the craziest thing happened when it was done and I got back to my office. I watched that episode and I listened to the interaction and I watched the community surround this person. And I watched the community support this person. And then I watched this person support the community. And it was in that moment that I realized, wait a minute, the Insider isn't a place for me to come and preach. It's not a place for me just to come and say, oh, here's the tool we're going to work on today. Let's go. Yeah, of course I do those things. But a community isn't a classroom. A community has its own culture. It doesn't have a curriculum. It doesn't have a syllabus. It has a culture. It's got a following. It's got a language. It's got momentum. It's got wins and losses. It's got a way of celebrating things together. That's community. And it was after I saw that first person lead a conversation with our community that I wasn't even a part of that I realized, wait a minute, members, for this community to work, members have to be able to lead this community. This community has to live longer than me. Today's episode is one of those conversations. It's one of these episodes, what I call a member-led call, a member-led insider call. And by the way, they happen every other week, twice a month. Members step up and they lead the conversation. This is a conversation that my friend Mike Haynes, who's been a member of Normal 40 not all that long in the grand scheme of things, probably about a year. And then he helped host a live event in Dallas, Texas in late 2025. And actually, no, that was in early 2026. My years are running together. My whole point is Mike's new to this. And when I asked Mike if he would consider doing this for me, he said, yeah, of course I would. But what should I talk about? That's always the question. And what I tell them is, I don't care what you talk about, man. Because I want you to do it because I want to be a student. I want to know what you know. I want to learn what you've learned. I want to step into your experience and take away from it what you've taken away from it. So Mike, all I want to do is I want to help you get clear on what that experience is so that you can teach it to all of us. You can organize it and teach it. And that's what we did. We had an hour conversation. And after that conversation, in that conversation, he shared a story about his dad. And I'm not going to talk about it much here because you're going to get to hear the entire thing. You're going to get to hear his entire conversation with the community. And you're going to get to hear the community ask him questions. And you're going to get to listen to him lead. And you're going to get to listen to others step in and be helpful. And you're going to get to listen to Mike step in and be helpful to them. But the story of his dad is that he passed away unexpectedly. And in his pocket was a single piece of paper. A scorecard about what he was getting right in this world and what needs improvement. So that's what Mike decided he wanted to talk about. The scorecard of life. And in the Insider, we've got a process that we go through. We've got a process that is, if you're here, we got to get brutally honest about the reality of you. What's really going on? What really brings you here? And you don't have to share it with me. You don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to say it in front of the community, but you got to know what it is. You got to have it written down. And at some point you need to get on my calendar and we need to talk about it, because if you're here, you don't want to be here. Nobody's like, oh, yay, I made it to Normal 40. Congratulations. I've got so much and feel so little. Hell no. You don't want to be here. It's not my job to keep you here. It's my job to move you on from here. But it starts with understanding what is the brutal reality of you? What's really going on here? The second thing we do is when I ask people, well, what brings you here? What do you want? What's the dream? They say things like, I want control over my time. I want control over my finances. I want to be able to take a vacation without asking for permission. I want to feel like I'm not getting behind every time I take a few days off of work. I just want to feel freedom. At some point, it comes back to this thing. I just want to experience freedom. And then I ask them, well, what's your definition of freedom? And that's an interesting question because I have a definition of freedom, but it might be different than your definition of freedom. But if what you want is freedom, but you don't have a definition, all you're telling me is that you don't have what you want. So rule number 3, define freedom. Excuse me, that's rule number 2, define freedom. What is it? Define it, write it down. You can change it, but have a starting point. Mine, to do what I want, with whom I want, when I want, however I want, without fear of consequence. That's it. That's my definition of freedom. 3, I ask people, what's a scorecard? What are you being measured by right now? What is the thing that your company is measuring you by? For you to be successful in your company, how are you being measured? Some people actually have a scorecard. Like literally that's what they call it. Other people just have a performance metric. They've got a bonus calculation. Well, guess what? That's a scorecard. If you do this, then we give you that. If you show up this many days, then we give you that. If you don't use this much vacation, then we give you that. If you use your sick days or not, then we give you that. It's all just a version of a scorecard. If you got promoted, it's part of your scorecard. If you got to keep your job, it's part of a scorecard. But chances are the way you're being scored today doesn't really matter to you anymore. Not in the way it did. I'm not talking about finance. I'm not talking about affording the home you live in. But those are table stakes. I'm talking about the scorecard that makes you feel good about being you. You don't have that scorecard. So the first thing we do, rule number 3, is burn the old scorecard, baby. Get ready to burn that thing. That doesn't mean quit your job. That doesn't mean quit going for your bonus. No. But it means quit letting it be the only thing that drives you. Step 4, write a new scorecard. Write the ingredients of your life in 4 years from now that if they're actually happening, you're winning. You're achieving your scorecard. You've defined freedom. You've got the ability to do what you want, with whom you want, when you want, how you want, without fear of consequence. That is my definition of freedom. And if you can do those things, if you can do nothing for yourself except for know what your scorecard should look like in years, you've actually done a lot. You've done a lot. And if you can bring that into a community like The Insider, and then you can muster the courage to tell a story like Mike Haynes did, the Mike Haynes who didn't want to tell his story, who just wanted to launch into, hey, let's just have a good conversation, who didn't want to slow the conversation down and say, here's what I've learned. Here's the good and the bad and the happy and the sad. Here's what I got right and what I got wrong. Here's where my kids helped me. Here's what I thought I was doing well and I didn't. When you find a community where you can have conversation like that, you have what I call fans. You have people who will show up for you just because you're on the journey. They'll show up for you because now they're on your journey. And guess what? You're on theirs. It is community. So what I'm going to share with you today is an episode of The Insider. An episode of Normal 40 The Insider that I wasn't on. I didn't participate in it. I didn't know what Mike was going to say. I didn't know what the questions were going to be. I just knew that he and I had a wonderful conversation about all of the incredible experience that would benefit everyone and has already benefited me. And if you've got the courage to lean into it, tell that story and watch it unfold for people right in front of you. And that's what he did. If this is something, I want you to listen to this episode. And I want you to know that this isn't the one-off. This isn't the best one. This isn't the one that I somehow made up to be the thing I wanted to promote. No. This happens every other week. Some member of my community leads. The other 2 weeks of the month, I lead it. This is the normal 40. This is community. When I harp on how important it is, I just want you to feel what happens in here. And most of these people have never met in person. I'm changing that too. My metric for this year is to do more live events, bring people to the ranch again. And as of this recording, I'm buying a ranch in Florida. Why? To bring people here. Because community has a culture, and in that culture has this real important need to be able to hug. That's part of the metric. All right, everyone. I really want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for being part of the Normal 40. I want you to join me. I want you to join the Insider. I want you to sign up for the newsletter. I want you to book a ramble, because guess what? I'm not going to do them for free much longer. I just, to be quite honest, don't have the time. Sorry. I'm at this place in my own growth journey where now I've got 24 acres to pay for, baby, because that's part of my future. But book a ramble with me. Join the Insider and become part of what we are building. I promise you, you won't regret it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for already being part of my journey. Thank you for letting my voice come right into your eardrums. And thank you for giving a thought, even if it's for a second, of joining something bigger than you. I want to say one more thing. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And I just want to tell you that the premise of that book, at least the title, isn't true. It's not even remotely true. I can't believe it sold any copies, to be quite honest. Because what got you here? What got you to this moment where my voice is somehow finding its way into your earlobes? What got you here? All of the successes, all the failures, all the ups, all the downs, all the paychecks, all the bonuses, hit and miss, all the deals won and lost. That can get you anywhere. But who you're going to need to make that change, who you're going to need to traverse this valley, who you're going to need to help you get clear on where you're going, who you're going to need to help drive it forward, who you're going to need to help you get clear, that's going to change. Who got you here? Who got you to where you are? Won't get you to where you're going. The people in the Insider, if I get it right, that's where we hang out. I want you to join us. I want you to enjoy this episode first. I want you to do me a favor and tell Michael Haynes thanks when you come in. He's fantastic. You'll get to meet him. And I want you to give some thought to joining a new community of people just to see where it might take you. All right, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being on the Normal 40 Highway. I'm going to see all of you on the podcast.
I want to talk about scorecards today and how that has pivoted and changed from my movement earlier in my career, big corporate, to the years and really more than a decade that I spent in venture capital environments. And as I hang my own shingle, how that has changed for me and some of the reasons why that's important to me. But I'll look forward to having conversation later in our time together about how we design and measure what it is that we're doing in ways that are constructive and that are accurate reflections of the way we are now and what it is that we invest our time and energy and resources into. How can we manage it if we don't measure it? So I want to have some of that discussion, but a little bit of background about me. I grew up all over the globe. My father was Navy, so got an early taste of ADD before I was even diagnosed with it, moving every 2 years. There's a toll to pay for that kind of frequent relocation, as some of you may know who are veterans or grew up in that environment. I got to know people quickly, got good at making friends very quickly. The downside of that is the rumors are true. I did eat my lunch in the bathroom in 8th grade for about a month because I didn't know anybody and I was only going to be in that third school for a short period of time. So got singed on some of the social adaptation stuff, but it did give me an opportunity to see Europe and see the Pacific and see all over the United States and open my aperture there and those experiences. Professionally, I worked in big corporate at Tylenol. I was an IBM guy coming out of undergrad. I was a marketer and sales guy and have been really my whole career. As I said, I transitioned into venture capital backed startups about 15 years ago and have done a bunch of different stuff there. My niche kind of has been selling technology to non-tech buyers. So a lot of heavy industry, a lot of dirty industry, everything from veterinary, medical. I've been up and down across most industries with some type of AI, ML backed solution. I was selling AI when it was still a Haley Joel Osment movie way back in the day. It's been a fun thing to watch, and it's certainly beginning to arrive now in a way that's a whole lot more meaningful and certainly has a whole lot wider impact, I think, across the economy. So it's been a fun trip. A lot of my experience in the VC world has been, once you've done it a couple of times, you understand the questions ahead of time, and it gives you the ability to operate in chaotic environments. And I've enjoyed the opportunity to try to create in chaos, try to provide systems where there is not a natural fit for systems, try to entertain someone who's going to spend 3 hours every 3 months thinking about your business when you're eating and breathing it for 60 hours a week. And so that experience was a great one for me. I've never really had one go. Obviously, I'm not flying around in my own private jet quite yet, but it's been a really lively and fun environment. I was in San Francisco for a number of years working on the pointy tip of the spear there. I got to know Paul in Atlanta when we were both at IBM and then ultimately at an early stage startup that did not pop, but we were close started. But that was the first time that I was able to tour the country visiting chimney sweeps, which was part of the solution profile that we were providing, which is great stuff. MapQuest, thank you. A shout out to them because that's how you find those places in the back streets of Boston. But it's been a fun journey. One of the realities, I think, in that operating environment, which really motivated me ultimately to make the trade, has been this phenomenon of kind of urgency for urgency's sake. And I found myself one late night having worked all week to prepare a deck and work with my team of 40 sellers to be able to tell our story in a quarterly review. And I realized the questions that we were going to be asked were not pertinent really to the business. It was more formulaic stuff. I had spent a lot of time and energy optimizing the presentation for optics and not necessarily for performance. But once you'd gone through it a bunch of times, it becomes a question of gaming the system. And I wasn't sure that the things that I had inherited and that we were being measured by were terrific reflections of what it was going to take to be successful. And as I've gone through this trade, the questions become, do I have a scorecard in mind that's a great depiction of what it will take to be successful as a holistic offering in this next phase? And I think, again, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So it's become a question that I've continued to challenge myself with, and I don't necessarily have the answers to, but I look forward to our talk today to maybe unearthing some of this stuff. But you can get involved in trying to do big lighthouse deals. And I've sold to Walmart and sold to Goldman and sold to large healthcare chains way too early. It was very obvious we were not going to be able to crunch that and meet all of the needs of those customers, but they were the kinds of deals that made the quarterly reviews and venture capital investors super excited. So I wasn't 100% sure that we potentially were using the word strategic when we should have been using the word survival in the way that we were framing up some of this stuff. It's been a great journey. I've enjoyed every adventure that we've had as a part of it. But when I did decide to transition out and do my own thing, because I had become frustrated with a high level of accountability and a low level of control, I knew that the scorecard that I was going to respond to was going to need to change as well. So I wanted to make sure that I was thinking about things, as I said, holistically in that fashion. A little bit of inside baseball. So much of the metrics that I think we all respond to or that we are measured by have to do with hitting a number, building a pipeline, making sure you're answering questions on point, not missing your quarter, not missing your month, not missing your year, certainly. And because of repetition, I got very good at that. I tell that story pretty well. I can fly that flag and entertain that crowd for the 2 or 3 hours that we were all in the boardroom doing that work. But I'm not sure that we were shaping the kind of behavior that was going to be leading to long-term success. And that becomes acutely important as I think about the way that I am looking to behave now that I'm out here doing it on my own for myself, for a very different makeup of a board. My stakeholders are very different. I used to respond to Graycroft and Top Tier Capital and other venture capital folks. And now I respond to a 5-year-old who wants to know when we can play for the football again and who's particularly interested in why his bracket's not working out that great. It's a different gig, and that's exciting and energizing and terrifying, and the urgency feels very real. And thinking long term when I'm trying to avoid financial challenges that are very meaningful and acute. There's no net, everything's live without, right? It does feel different. And so I want to make sure that I'm being thoughtful, that I have a longer view when urgency and desperation are always hiding under the bed. So it's a different way of thinking. I used to think about revenue. Now I need to think about cash flows. Again, that family versus investor dynamic is very real. Actually went through a kind of a fun exercise as I was preparing for this and asking each member of my family if they were trying to add something to the new scorecard, what would it be? And I ended up with some good stuff without giving away names. I have three boys, ages 21, 12, and 5. So as good a business planner as I am, maybe family planner, not so much, but I got 5 nights of Boy Scout camping per year. So that's a pretty good metric that I'll have to respond to. 6 coaching wins in U6 flag football, critical metric there. I won't say who said this one. 0 credit card declines at HEB. That's critical. 1 dinner at Oxford with no particular agenda per semester for my oldest, and then 1 long weekend without kids per semester with my wife. So the rule book has changed. The scorecard has certainly changed. And the question becomes, how do we get in front of this thing? How do we think about it in a way that is much more holistic and that ultimately will deliver the best of us to our clients, to our stakeholders, our families, our friends, our communities, our faith groups, wherever we're putting that energy? How can I make sure that I'm giving the best of what I've got while avoiding the kind of natural stressors and potential burnout that plagued me when I was in my previous roles? And I don't want it to follow me into this one because I create a structure that looks a whole lot like the one I left, at least from a scorecard perspective. So yeah, the kind of key line there is I'm transitioning my thinking was the scorecard got smaller, but it got a whole lot heavier, much more impact, much more importance, much more urgency. Yeah, so my behavior's changed. I'm trying to think about things in the context of driving the right outcomes and enjoying the process as I move through it. And there's no scorecard really to inherit, right? In most of the roles I took, it was either the measurables were being handed down by a board or by a previous occupant of the role. And in here, I'm trying to define it. And much like nature abhors a vacuum, if you don't define it, it defines you. And so I think that becomes an issue that I want to give time and attention to. And this process of preparing for the talk today has helped me to spend a little bit more time being philosophical about what it is that I want to be able to accomplish. And ultimately, I'll ask the group, how are we thinking about such things and what metrics are you using in the management of your own business to realize it's a huge part of your life, but it is a part of your life. And how do we manage that handoff? The other thing I'll say about this, and the reason that the kind of scorecard concept really hits me hard, is my mom reminded me that about 24 years ago, my father had gone through this exercise. He had, through his work in the kind of Sunday school men's group that he was a part of at his church, he had gone through a report card review process where he went through an audit of how he was doing in the various capacities and dynamics of his life, give himself a grade, things to work on, areas for improvement, I guess we would call that in HR speak, and do an honest assessment of how he was doing and where he wanted to put more time and resources. And he went through that exercise on a Sunday morning in January. And then when he got home, he put that in his back pocket and he went out to knock some ice off the ceiling, off the roof of our house. And the ladder slipped away from the wall and he fell and broke his neck. And 3 minutes later, he passed away in my mother's arms. And this is that scorecard that he had in his back pocket when that event happened. And I went over it. I hadn't seen it in years. I went over it last night. And he made one mention of his profession. He said, the job is stable. And everything else was about other parts of his life that were far more impactful to him. Certainly no way he knew that he was hours away from the end of his life when he authored this, when he went through this process. But it matters. And it is acutely important because you don't know when you run out of leash, when you run out of time and run out of breath. And it just feels like having a guiding concept to where your priorities are, how do you show what's important unless you think about it, capture it, metric it, and measure it, and help manage yourself by way of looking at things through that lens. Yeah, it brings a lot out for me to think about it in that capacity, but it certainly is important. And I want to make sure I don't make that mistake because none of us know, right? Yeah, I appreciate you letting me share that. When I look at the business side of it, and I think about the way that I want to define a scorecard, one of the things that comes to mind really is making sure that I'm not playing into what I did before. I'm not recreating the same models that I fled before. There's been a lot of talk in these sessions around what are you running to, not what are you running away from. And I think the scorecard is an opportunity to add specifics to that question. The other thing that's very real to me is I think all of us are very capable of winning a game that we don't particularly want to be playing. We've been successful in other environments, and I know how to talk it out for 90 minutes or 2 hours with a board and survive, or even win that conversation. But I don't want to do that anymore. And when I went through this process, a lot of what jumps out to me when I'm thinking about things like superhero versus super weakness, or super strength and super weakness, are the things that I have been successful at, I don't want to bring through this side of the curtain, right? I want to leave some of the things that I felt were performative or that were more about kind of the appearance, leave those behind and put all my effort into being present versus it's more about attention and presence than it is about just necessarily showing up. And so I went through this exercise and I was trying to think about the different facets of a successful scorecard. And yes, some of them are about financial performance, but it's more about sufficiency and how able I am to create what it's going to take for me to be successful, but defining success more in the context of creating value and being present and impacting people in a way that matters to them and by proxy matters to me in the same. Quality versus quantity, trying to create client quality and real impact in the lives and motion of folks that I engage with. That has to do with saying no more than I used to. I was always a burn the ships yes guy, as far as I'll tackle any mountain. Old ex-athlete will just drop a shoulder and maintain leg drive and get through it. And it's challenging to be more selective around where we spend time. Kathy and I were talking about that kind of as the call got started. What we're able to do and what we should be doing are not necessarily the same things. And so I'm trying to be more thoughtful and present about that. Big question for me is this question of control. And I've heard people talk over the various weeks around wanting to transition from something that dictated time to you and go instead in the direction of something that allows you to see all 50 states or allows you to be able to move a meeting from 1 to 2, because frankly, it didn't really matter that much. And I wanted to go see the kids' recital or whatever experience there was. I think we have a better understanding as a society of that than we used to. But with technological advance, people have shorter fuses for when they expect responses. There's a natural collision that's happening there. So I want to focus on that control. So I'm trying to find metrics that allow me to understand and measure that control. How many hours a week am I putting in? How much spillover is there into what I would describe as protected time? What does my energy level look like at the end of a day or at the end of a week? Am I putting myself in a kind of unnatural position that will add to my stress and potentially hurt my ability to bring my best to whatever my engagement is at that time? And then for me, it was this big question of real work versus performative, right? So much around, I've said before, if you ever want to find a pharmaceutical rep, go hang out at a Starbucks at about 4 o'clock on a Friday. They're all doing their CRM data entry. So some of this stuff is performative and it's about optics. And I want to make sure that where I'm spending my time is about real value creation and real work, closing business, advancing things through a measured cycle, presenting solutions to customers, like real stuff versus look busy. There's no room for looking busy when when it's me, that the only one out here is going to be myself, right? There's no, as they say, Larry Bird's not going through that door, right? We're going to have to win this thing on our own. So this output versus activity question, I think is a big one for me. And then the big stuff that I never have seen on a KPI or on a scorecard that I've responded to is questions of personal discipline, right? Be honest with yourself. I'm victim, as Lon as well, of some of the avoidance stuff. Am I doing the hard stuff? Am I doing the hard stuff well? Am I trading in immediacy, right? Can I do more in a timely fashion, or am I pushing things down the line unnecessarily? It can be as simple as scheduling bumpers in the beginning and the ending of a day for me to spend time knocking out things that don't take much, but that I've been avoiding for whatever reason. Stress governance. I don't think I've ever been asked about stress governance as it relates to positions that I was in, but it's a big deal. Am I operating with intention or am I just responding to pressure, either real or synthetic? And am I accepting stress that is not necessary? And then am I carrying that away from the desk and into the living room, or away from the desk and into a practice with one of my kids, or a conversation with my wife? Where is that having effect? And then ultimately, this question of time versus attention, showing up, being as the best version of myself in the various theaters that I have to entertain, right? Am I bringing good energy to a kid's practice, or have I burned myself out from doing something for work? Did should not necessarily have been above the line. I think one of the challenges that I've dealt with working from home is that you don't get some of the natural depressurization stuff. There's no commute, right? My commute is 8 feet into the kitchen, and that creates a very different systemic impact than when I used to have a 35-minute drive home from work. Yeah. So I'm trying to think about this more holistically while not turning it into something this is still people's livelihoods, right? I'm still looking to create real value for clients and customers. I still want to do good work. And so the ultimate question is, what can I ask of myself to make sure that the work I'm doing is as good as it could be? And how am I creating a situation and measuring my behaviors in such a way that the quality of the work is maximal, rather than if I'm being performative and I got good at playing the game, I could do pretty darn well. I could get past what I needed to get past without necessarily redlining, just going through the motions. And I don't want to live like that. I want to be proud of the work that I'm doing. And now that I'm out here on my own, it becomes a question of how do we get the best from ourselves? So with that, let me kind of transition into a larger discussion here. When we think about scorecards or metrics that we're using to measure ourselves post trade, what are the kind of things that you're leaning on, and how does that reflect a more complete or holistic attitude towards what you're doing, who you're doing it for, who are the stakeholders in your life that benefit from this, and how your clients or customers benefit from it as well?
Mike, thanks for sharing that. I think within that, there's a pretty traumatic situation that you brought up, right? And you looked at the list, and I don't think that's to be downplayed in the whole scorecard discussion. I feel like this is a place where Joel's going to ask a question. But I guess what I would say is I think it's the idea of scorecard's awesome. I'm looking at a list of things to do and not a scorecard right now. And I would just share one thing that I learned at the ranch from somebody who was there. And you mentioned some personal goals and things like that. It's really stuck with me. I haven't done it yet, but it was about 6 months ago. And what the guy there said that he is doing on a scorecard is he's asking his kids to complete a list of things that they need from him to feel loved.
Mhm.
And I just feel like that was an applicable thing to share because I think you asked the question, do you have some of those in there? But this idea of what do you need from me to feel loved, I think is takes it up a step. So I wanted to share that with you as you refine your scorecard.
That's really good. I like that. And I'll admit, it's my 5-year-old was quick with the answer. My 12-year-old didn't know how to take the question. And it was, I'm not necessarily wanting to say, how do we quantify love? But I think that this is one of those things, it's a qualitative, right? How do I make you feel supported? And it can be a tough thing for kids to grapple with, but I like the idea that's the way we're thinking about this.
Yeah.
If going through the door, someone says, hey, how's the family? That's about as close as you're going to get in a corporate environment of someone really caring about what's going on at home. This is a different environment than that. But I appreciate that insight. That's good.
Can I jump in here for a second, Mike?
Absolutely.
I still haven't gotten past your upbringing there and losing your father.
Yeah.
Let me just say that. I just wrote down some notes about everything you just talked about, except for the scorecard piece. But you had a father who died from a ladder fall at a young age. What were you, 5, you said?
I was a little bit older, but I was out of college already. But
Okay.
Yeah.
But still, I wrote down, like, you were self-made in the deepest sense. You have resilience that I can't even imagine, of when early independence, emotional toughness, the ability to adapt, and you're someone who learned strength the freaking hard way, right? Without a father, without a model, right? And then you're a dude who carries both a scar and a superpower. Like, that to me is just unbelievable. Self-made in like the truest sense, right? Someone who turned that loss into strength, purpose, and you just articulated your achievement. I'm done. I can't even, that's amazing to me.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Clark. Thank you. Yeah, one of the things that I think, and we all suffered various challenges, and I have been consistently and continually impressed by specifically folks in this group who have family members that are facing unique challenges, or they themselves are facing unique challenges, and how that has been turned into something that is a benefit to those who are lucky enough to meet them. Thinking of the conversation, the Breaking Braces presentation from
Prime
a couple
example.
weeks ago.
Yeah.
Brent just absolutely crushed it. And I'm with you. Sometimes it takes a second for me to refocus on what we were discussing because the challenges are so overwhelming. And yet here you have a guy who has run right through those walls, quite literally, and broken those braces. And NHL guys are no challenge for what he's been able to accomplish in the face of that. And I think that resonates with people. But then the challenge becomes, okay, but now what? So I believe you. How do I use that? How can I build on that to create, to do more, to be a more trusted partner or vendor or consultant or the things that matter to other folks? How can we use that to create a better environment for the folks that we're interacting with? And again, it's like putting numbers to things is so hard. Let me add one more unit of love to the way my son feels. Maybe not quite like that, but I want to be able to think about things rather than tell me about cost of customer acquisition and top line revenue only, right? I think those we can take comfort in the number because I can throw levers and try to affect their outcomes. But if I'm going to be more holistic in the way that I think about my personal and professional life, then I want to be able to affect positive outcomes across all those things, right? And to love is not a metric, but it making your kids feel better, your spouse feel more appreciated. That's a part of the larger experience. And I certainly have shareholder meetings much more frequently now over the dinner table than I used to.
Hey, Matt, this is Jim. Just a couple comments, and thanks for leading today's session. Appreciate all the stories. You said a lot of things that really resonated with me, and this is just more of just to know that a lot of us are in the same boat and feel a lot of the same things. But when you talked about kind of being responsible and accountable for your numbers and selling things, but then not having the ability to actually control the outcomes. So you're selling to the Walmarts and all these places, but knowing that you probably can't meet those deliverables. And that seems to be a real common thing. And I've always really grappled with that. Working for smaller companies, you're selling a vision, right? And as the salesperson or as the account manager or the person that's actually having a lot of sales is about relationships and building that trust. And so it almost felt very false, or I don't have the right words for it, but it's my name. I'm selling this, yet I have no influence on the deliverables. And if we don't deliver, then you feel personal. It's my name. I didn't deliver on that, and it's my reputation. And that was something that I really struggled with and still struggle with. And as I got older, you kind of get that, at least I am at the point where I don't do that anymore, right? And the company doesn't like that, right? But at the same time, the customer loves it and appreciates it, and I sell what I know can be delivered on, and I'm very honest and transparent. And the corporate world doesn't always like that, right? They want to just hear what they want to hear, and they want to know that you're making the numbers. And to me, life is just so much more than that. And I've gotten to the point where if that's what they want, then I'm not the person for them.
Yep.
But if they stick with me and if they do it the way that I go about doing things, then okay, you may not make some numbers, but I had, one, actually a guy who worked for me, he said, you want $1 million in this hand, or you can have buck all in this hand,
Yeah.
and I'll give you something in the middle there, right? What do you want, right? And so anyway, just a point saying that a lot of us feel that same story that you went through.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of, especially in early stage stuff, there's a lot of pressure to try to get a lighthouse deal done. And it's very much careful what you wish for on that stuff. One of the realities, I think, in VC founder land is that the process of pitching your company to investors is almost the exact opposite of the way you would sell your product or service to your customer, right? It's an infinite addressable market. No, customer doesn't want to hear that, right? We're going to be able to take massive margins. Customer doesn't want to hear that. And then it's always a very personal narrative. And this is, frankly, it's the first time I've been a full-blown founder, right? I typically come in as the first commercial sales guy and set up that motion. So you've got, for the first time, strangers selling to strangers. And it does become very much an extension of who you are as a person. And I still get Christmas cards from 24-hour fitness guy who I sold their CFO. I sold him 20 years ago, almost. And he's the CFO now, but he wasn't then. And it was a great deal that ended up getting him moved up the ladder. And it's been a meteoric rise. So good for him. But that it really is our brand out there. And it never more obviously than now, right? With I spent some time and energy trying to get the logo right, but it might as well just be my name. Yeah, it's important to represent in a way that has a moral dynamic to it as well. I think there's certainly an ethical question that we have to ask ourselves. For those who've already gone through the trade, if it's not a formal process, how do you think about, or what's the kind of the review for how business is going, and against what metrics do you evaluate versus things are moving up and to the right, or they're flat, or they're down? Like, how does that process go for folks who've already gone through the trade part of this experience?
Hey, Mike, it's Joel. Just a couple of things, and I think I'll answer your question with my question, but I truly find myself asking this of myself and others around me, which is, what is success? Because I, at 25 years old, would told you success would have been if I could make six figures.
Yeah.
And I did that. And so now what? Am I done? And so this hamster wheel that we're on, at what point do you find success? Do you find happiness? Because I was putting my success, I'm using air quotes, at the expense of my family early on in my career. And so, me defining success is a much more holistic view, which is part of this conversation, that says professionally, I could look at the business I run today, having made the trade, and I could look at simple metrics like revenues, expenses, profits. Those are very traditional metrics. I think the metric that I am most focused on is impact. Where am I having the impact on the customers, the clients, the people that I'm trying to focus my energies on? And in some instances, it's not even measurable. I send out reviews of every event that we put on. I get feedback. I just had a dude fill out a feedback and he gave me raving reviews. But when I said, what other commentary, what other things could you add to make this trips better? He wrote an entire page. So the metrics say 10, which makes me feel great. But then he said, hey, Bozo, here's a couple of things you probably want to focus on. And he was very kind about how he said Bozo. But so for me, happiness, success are completely different metrics at 55 than they were at 35 or 45. And so I just challenge you, as we're thinking about, yes, did I make the trade? But I also, success was going to be starting a business. I'm 2 years into that journey. Am I done? 5 years ago, success would have been leaving that business in the corporate world and starting this business. So I did it. I'm done. No. And so I want us to just be very mindful about success physically, mentally, spiritually, financially. How is your family? Give yourself a scorecard on that family metric. My relationship with my daughter today is 4,000 times better than it was 10 years ago. I would have gotten a fat F, but I worked at it. And so I paused to see how I define those success metrics. Sorry, I don't know if I'm even answering your question, but that's my.
Yeah, you are. It's funny you raised that, because the thing that I noticed about the note my dad had left was, relationship with my sons is great. Now I just want more. And that more would get you plastered in a quarterly, right? We're doing more. Okay, great. 12%, 112%, 4,000%. It's like the things that are most important are the hardest to quantify, and that's okay, right? Some of the stuff's going to be almost, I feel like I almost want to use an emoji to represent like how we doing. But I want it on a scorecard because I want to pay attention to it. And I don't want to go back to the place that I came from, which was, no one cares about that, man. This is an outputs thing. And whatever it takes, right? By hook or by crook, hit the number, don't miss the quarter. And the things that are really important they're just much more likely to have a qualitative connection. But I want to measure them because I want to manage it. I want it to be a part of the way that I'm thinking about what I'm doing now versus what I was doing 2 years ago.
Mike, this is Kathy here. I don't know. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, because I'm in motion. So, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for deeply sharing your story. I'll echo what Clark said, and Matt, there's everyone that has chimed in and shined a light on part of the things you said or shared some nuggets back to you. Just receive those, because, man, pretty epic. Clark, you can tell he's a writer because he just said it so well. Just going to be honest. To answer your question, what's interesting is just yesterday, I went through an exercise, and that exercise was actually looking at time. I like what you said. For so many years, I would put my shoulder down and I would keep my legs moving through stuff. And I almost thought, looking back, that I actually really believe that I could create more time if I ran harder. And when we're younger, man, we do some stupid shit, just being honest. And so what I know now, and you're right, we talked about this a little bit at the start of the call, is you don't get any more time. No matter how fast you move, it doesn't expand the hours or put more hours on the clock every day. And for me, and I'll just speak for me, organizing and being disciplined in my time actually helps me achieve the metrics that are very similar to yours based on my family's needs and what I want to accomplish. It actually helping me stay disciplined in my time and managing it well actually allows me to hit those metrics. And I got all excited. I've had some calls coming in. There's stuff going on, right? And it's, oh my gosh, I almost can feel myself accelerating. And I'm like, you know what, Kathy, you're going to stop right now and you're going to go ahead and map out the hours you're currently spending with current clients. You're going to measure, and I love what Joel said, I know what success looks like for every one of my clients. And how am I doing that, right? Am I in steady traction of that, right? And let's look at the hours that I have promised them, weekly, monthly, right? How am I doing on that? And so I really created a report card for myself on how I was doing. And then I looked realistically at just how many hours do I have to give, right? Those 2 clients that I thought I could add, that's unrealistic, period. So I don't know if that's just an exercise that I just did yesterday.
That's very good. That's very good. Yeah, I think that's funny. I was listening to Paul talk about the experience he's having down in Arlington at the card store. I wonder, because of the high quality of experience that you're getting to have with your son on that, Paul, I wonder if we were valuing it completely, the financial returns, I'm sure, will be great, but the total return, emotional, qualitative, quantitative, the whole 9 yards, it's been fun to watch that get momentum because of the quality of the total experience that you're having with that. I know you're loving it. And that's
most of it. If I don't screw it up, it'll be great. The joke that I like to tell is I'm a much better dad than I am a boss. I think Darren's heard that. So I think at the end of this journey, Davin will still like me. We'll see. But I wrote down a bunch of notes while you were talking, and I've gone from one end of the spectrum to the other. As you were talking about a scorecard, and I do remember us in our early 20s when you went through that with your dad. I don't think I selfishly understood at the time the depth of that one. I think I just had Davin. I think we were all in our early 20s. So, I definitely remember it. But I think it brings up a very good point. I don't want a scorecard. I don't want you or my wife or my kids or my boss or anybody scoring me. And so as you were talking, I was automatically mindset against it, right? I even wrote down like Jack Nicholson kind of thing. You need that scorecard. You want that scorecard. The scorecard's going to get you. But I've gone to the total opposite. And I think there was 16 of us on the call, and there's more listening later, but many of us are doing something similar in a coaching aspect of trying to bring C-level executives to a point where they're making their own company better. And I think the name of your company is the Scorecard, quite frankly. As you bring in the scorecard to your clients, I would love to see that done as a joint effort. I wrote down Mike plus Darren plus Colleen plus Joel plus Matt plus Kathy equals this group coming at a C-level person. And whether it's through culture, sales metrics, coaching on what is success, what Joel was talking about, from your perspective in sales and product, there's an avenue here, I think, for you to bring that scorecard into your everyday consulting method, starting a company that brings people like me or C-level people who are A personalities, right? Type A personalities don't want you coming into a room and saying, hey, this is where you're wrong. But there's a need. We need the scorecard. I think we all need it in our personal lives. And I really do think there's something here for not only you, but the others on the call that can, as in a perfect world, as a group, go into a company and ask the C-level people about themselves, about their impact, about their message, about their clients, about their purpose, their culture. And what I wrote down is separating the bullshit from the reality, which I think you do very well, is also in the concept of, hey, let's get over ourselves a little bit and let's understand and recognize what we're doing well as a company, what we're not doing well as a company. Separate that out. You can do that better than most because as a salesperson, you can recognize the guy at 4 o'clock on a Starbucks filling his CRM probably is not doing that great of a job. So I'm all over the map there a little bit, but I think the point being the scorecard is you. The scorecard can be brought very effectively to companies, drawing on others in this group. And I think as a collective or as an individual, you have an unbelievable consulting practice based off of the scorecard, quite frankly. And maybe that becomes the backbone for what you're delivering to clients, differentiating yourselves from other coaches, other consultants, other people. So,
Mhm.
you know me, I ramble. I hopefully
No,
that made sense, but
this is good. It's
there's
funny.
something there. There really
Yeah,
is.
it sparks for me how I got to know the group in general. And I remember you reached out to me with a deck you were going to pitch for money. And I said, let me see it. I see those things all the time. Let me give it a once over. And that I enjoy. My wife was saying you're missing dinner because you're having too good of a time going through Paul's pitch deck. You need more hobbies, Mike. But the fact of the matter is, like, I know a lot about that stuff, and every square in our normal 40 calls is filled with someone who knows a whole lot about a
Yeah.
variety of different topics. The collective is pretty damn impressive. And one of the things that the realities of a scorecard for me is one of the things I struggle with is how do I dimension so that I can monetize expertise that may feel automatic for me, but it's been well earned over 30 years to get my butt kicked. I've sold $500 million worth of stuff. I've probably lost $4 billion of sales. I've been through a lot, and being able to bring that to bear for a client does not necessarily get monetized or valued in the right way unless I'm thinking about it from an inputs and outputs perspective. But I'm
Yeah.
with you.
I think you
There's so
did
much
it on this
collective
call.
here. Yeah.
I really, really think you did it on this call, and that's where I was going. How do we all monetize what we want to do and monetize or create or whatever the
Yeah.
word
Yeah.
is, but
Sure.
how do we make a living at
Yeah.
what we want to do? I think you did it on this call. When you listen to the replay, I'm the king of stating the obvious. The scorecard is a necessary component, whether you're looking at, as Joel pointed out, what makes you a success as a C level, whether it's a little bit of coaching, a little bit of
Mhm.
sales analysis, a little bit of how you run your company. I'm going to give it to you all. And where I don't know the answer, I'm going to draw on Kathy or Matt or Colleen to bring you what you need. Let's understand what you as a C level need, what your company needs, whether that's a startup or an established.
Yeah.
I think you nailed it in what your version 2.0 Mike Haynes consulting company could be, honestly, when we look back at this call. And I think everybody can really take something from it to say, all right, what can we do to actually do for a living what we want to do, AKA monetize? So
Yeah. Very good.
I think it's all right there.
Yeah, you're right. That's good stuff.
Excuse me, I'll make a couple of comments. I'm generally, I don't know, I guess I should have drank some water before talking. I generally feel like I'm a fly on the wall here because I love hearing what other people say and they always resonate. Joel brought up a great thing. I think I was always driven by obviously doing well in my career and so on, which is like consulting or running large consulting teams and so on. But compensation was my driver over anything. And I lost my parents like in 2024, like 3 months apart from each other. And that kind of opened my eyes and said, really, does this really matter much more? My kids are all set. My daughter's now started her career and my son's in college and that's all covered and all that stuff. And so I'd like, Last year, it turns out I hated the guys that I worked with that owned the firm that I was working for after my parents made me realize all that and went through that whole process. And so I think I'm kind of still, even though I've been kind of doing this interim kind of role and consulting, helping customers in finance and financial systems, et cetera, making like maybe 20% I made 2025, 20% that I made in 2024 or something like that. But and hoping that some of these pre-IPO investments that I did hit. Some of that is my scorecard is still lacking on, aside what really drove this is looking back at my dad and what he did. He was in public accounting and all that stuff, but he kind of retired early and went and did, like, he was the mayor of the town I grew up in. He was the head of the hospital board. He did all these, and I always gave him a hard time because when I was younger, that all this stuff was free. And I was like, again, I was driven by this money. I'm like, Dad, why do you keep doing all this stuff that doesn't pay you shit? And you're like, you're like busier than you ever were almost. It's because he likes it. And I kind of, some of this call right here makes me realize that's kind of the thing that's missing on my scorecard. I want to start doing some of those things. I got to figure out what it is. I don't want to be in politics, clearly, and I don't think anybody should think that's a great idea. But I got to do that scorecard to kind of say this is what's missing on some of my things, and the money, whatever, is going to
Hey, Doug,
be what it needs to be. Yeah,
don't ever get into politics, please.
exactly, exactly.
You and I can lick wounds together. I went through a similar journey that recalibrates priorities in life. My dad died in 18. My mom died 5 months later. I got divorced in 20. We went through a pandemic, and then I lost my job in 23.
Yeah.
None of the shit that I accomplished in the 30 years of my professional career in corporate world means a stitch of nothing to me today.
Exactly.
So as you're going through these silos of our lives, whether that's emotional, physical, spiritual, monetary, whatever it is, the lens that I look through life and what is success and what is happiness have changed completely. And it just sucks that I had to go through that trauma in such a concentrated point. But I think there are these moments that we absolutely just change and evolve. And sometimes it is those traumas that carry you forward into the best chapter of your life. And that's where I feel. So
yeah, after I got through the kind of grief stuff, now I'm past that, whatever. And I didn't have all the other things that happened after you because those were already past me and stuff. But yeah, it's interesting times.
You're not alone, buddy.
Well, I know we're near the top of the hour. I really appreciate the back and forth on this thing. I look up and it's been 58 minutes, which is always a good sign, right? I really do appreciate the feedback on this and the fresh perspectives. Everyone's the star of their own movie here, but I think the reality is we want to be in ensemble casts with people we care about, and you want to be able to create value and contribute to a bunch of different folks, stakeholders, and a bunch of different currencies, right? Not just money, of course, but time and attention and awareness and understanding and empathy and all the other things. So I think it's a healthy conversation. I really do appreciate everyone's perspective on it, and excited to continue to think about this.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Appreciate it.
Nice work.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, well done.
Take care, everyone.
Hey, everyone. That's going to do it for me, Lon Stroschein, the founder of the Normal 40. And I really, really want to say thank you to Michael Haynes for leading this incredible conversation. Dude, you are so articulate and so helpful, and I can literally feel your goodness coming through this podcast. And every single person who heard it can too. Dude, I'm a fan. Thanks for being you. To everyone else who listened in on this podcast, you get a choice right now. You've got a choice of just saying, well, that's cool. Maybe he's got another podcast. Great. I do. I've got about 90 of them. Go listen to them. But I also want to invite you to do a little bit more. I want to invite you to do something that isn't free. I want to invite you to do something that isn't even probably obvious. I want to invite you to join the Insider. Not because $47 a month changes my life. It won't. Because if you're not willing to spend $47 to change your life, you won't change yours either. Join us. This is what we do. This wasn't just a one-off conversation. This is what happens every week inside of our community, and I'm inviting you to be a part of it. All right, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of my journey. Thanks for being on the Normal 40 Highway. I'm going to see all of you on the next page.